What if the same tragic story could happen twice? In a nation haunted by its past, the unthinkable has just happened again. For a country that believed it had moved on from an era of political bloodshed, the death of a rising star in politics is a devastating reminder that some ghosts never truly disappear. This is the story of Miguel Uribe, a man born into a dynasty, but destined to face a destiny eerily similar to his mother's. Miguel Uribe's life was a mirror of his country's hopes and fears. The grandson of a former president, Julio Cesar Turbay Ayala, he was a political prodigy on a path to power. But his family's legacy wasn't just one of influence, it was also one of unspeakable tragedy. Just decades ago, his mother, the celebrated journalist Diana Turbay, was taken as a political prisoner by a ruthless cartel. She wouldn't make it out alive, perishing during a failed rescue mission in 1991. For Uribe, the echoes of that dark history were always there, a constant reminder of the stakes in Colombian politics. He was only a child when his mother was taken, and now he'd met a fate eerily similar to hers. This wasn't just another story of violence. This was a chilling, devastating parallel that proved the past was never truly gone. The unthinkable happened on a bright June day. Miguel Uribe, a presidential hopeful, was speaking to a crowd at a campaign rally in a park in Bogotá. It was a scene of hope and optimism until a flash of violence tore through the air. In a matter of seconds, a young gunman rushed the stage and fired at least 3 shots, hitting Uribe in the head and leg. The attack was swift, shocking, and happened in the unforgiving light of day. A chaotic gunfight broke out between the gunman and Uribe's bodyguards, as terrified onlookers fled for their lives. Uribe was rushed to the hospital where he fought for his life for 2 agonizing months. Despite multiple surgeries, his condition worsened, with doctors announcing a severe cerebral hemorrhage. A nation held its breath, but in the end, the wounds were too severe. He succumbed to his injuries, his death a horrifying parallel to the past. But that wasn't the whole story. The investigation that followed only deepened the chilling mystery. Authorities quickly rounded up for individuals connected to the shooting, including a 14-year-old boy identified as the triggerman. In the chaos of his arrest, the teen reportedly cried out that he did it for the money for my family. But as the suspects were interrogated, a far more sinister picture emerged. They didn't act alone. They were just pawns, allegedly acting on orders. They told prosecutors they were following commands from a man known only as El Costeño. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was a calculated hit, and the hunt was now on for the mastermind who had put a price on the senator's head. But who was this mysterious figure? And what happened next would shock everyone. The hunt for answers led to a name that sent a chill down the spine of the nation: Elder Jose Artiga, aka El Costeño, a chilling figure with a long rap sheet. Rumors and reports describe him as a criminal with a history of involvement in drug trafficking and hit jobs for hire. He was allegedly the one who recruited the team, including the teenage triggerman, and gave the final ruthless order. In the days after the shooting, El Costeño was a ghost, shadowy mastermind who had vanished without a trace, prompting a massive manhunt. But that wasn't the end of his story. Just a few weeks later, authorities closed in and arrested him. In a neighborhood in Bogotá now, with the alleged logistical mastermind in custody, the real question is whether he'll lead them to the person or people who truly wanted Miguel Uribe out of the picture. The case is far from closed, and the deepest secrets may still be buried in the darkness. For a generation of Colombians, the attack on Uribe felt like a devastating replay of a movie they never wanted to see again. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the country was gripped by a ruthless wave of political assassinations. Presidential candidates like Luis Carlos Galen, Bernardo Jaramillo, and Carlos Pizarro were all brutally gunned down. This was a time when organized crime and paramilitary groups used violence as a tool to silence opposition and terrorize the nation. The killing of Uribe, a rising political star, evoked a widespread, almost visceral fear that Colombia was returning to that dark and violent era, a period they had struggled so hard to leave behind. This wasn't just a random act of criminal violence. It was a cold, calculated message designed to bring a nation to its knees and remind them of a past they can never truly escape. This tragedy unfolded against a backdrop of intense political friction, a nation deeply divided on how to move forward. Uribe was a prominent conservative and a fierce critic of the current president, Gustavo Petro. Uribe and his allies argued for a hardline approach to security, a strategy of confronting criminal groups head-on, with no mercy. This stood in stark contrast to Petro's Total Peace Initiative, which aims to negotiate with these very same groups. This fundamental disagreement was more than just a policy debate. It was a clash of ideologies that defined the nation's political landscape. Without making any definitive claims, the sheer intensity of this division has led to widespread speculation. Was this a personal vendetta? A message from an organized crime group that felt threatened by Uribe's stance? Or something even more deeply entrenched in the country's turbulent politics? The motive for the attack is still a mystery, but the context is all too clear. The death of Miguel Uribe has left a nation in mourning and a family in tatters. His wife's social media post, a heartbreaking promise to her late husband to care for their children, encapsulates the raw pain. But beyond the personal tragedy, this is a story about a nation wrestling with its demons. The assassination of Miguel Uribe is more than just a crime. It's a powerful, devastating reminder that in Colombia, the past is never truly dead. The ghosts of the country's dark history continue to whisper their terrible stories to a new generation, with each act of violence threatening to undo decades of hard-won peace. The question that hangs in the air, a question that every Colombian is forced to confront, is this: will they ever find a way to silence the ghosts of the past? For good.